You think you don't remember. You do remember. You just don't recall. It's not the same thing. Okay? Let me give you an example. I sometimes tell this story. It's a true story. None of you will believe this. Okay? Let's say this happened 20 years ago. I've been married to my wife now for 53 and a half years. So let's say 20 years ago, when I was 58, I asked her to sleep with me one night, okay? And this is the part you won't believe. She says no, okay? And you're wondering, how is this even possible, you know? So the question is, how does a 53-year-old successful doctor, father of 3 children, newspaper columnist, respond when his wife says no? Not tonight. Well, I tell you how I respond. I go into a rage and a depression, and I curl into a fetal ball on the bed, and I wish that I was dead. And next morning, I'm not even looking at her. Okay? Now, all that happens was that she said no. She didn't feel like it. Maybe she didn't like me very much that day. Maybe she was tired. What was I going to this fetal despair, this infantile despair? Now, I don't recall my mother giving me to a stranger. She did. I was a year old. I've been there. I've been at the very spot in Budapest where this happened. I can tell you the address, but I don't recall it. As a 1-year-old, you don't recall, because the part of the brain that recalls doesn't exist yet. But there's a memory. So there's 2 kinds of memory you have to understand. There's explicit memory, which can call back. You can call back what you had for breakfast this morning. You can recall something you saw in the movie. But that recall memory doesn't come online doesn't even begin to develop till you're a year and a half. And most people, they have no recall from before the age of 3, 4, 5. But memory, remembering something is a part of you, that goes back to the womb. Memory without recall. And the memory shows up in the form of the emotions that you experience when something resembles it. Now you can see with my mom, how would I, her giving me to the stranger was an incredible act of love. The Nazis occupied Hungary. She didn't know if she'd be alive or dead the next day. She couldn't feed me. She was 24 years old, and she gives me to a stranger. That's an incredible act of love. But how do I experience it? As abandonment. So 52 years later, or 57 years later, when a woman on whom I'm relying for physical contact and love and support says no, I'm remembering. I'm not recalling. If I had recalled, I would have said, oh, this feels just like when my mom gave me to a stranger, and that would have been okay. But there's no recollection. There's only the emotional memory and the physiological memory. So it's not that you don't recall. It's not that you don't remember. It's that you don't recall. And you know what? You don't have to. I only know the story because they told it to me. You don't have to recall, because you remember every day. Every time, if you have a partner, every time they say no, every time you think somebody is rejecting you, your whole body changes, doesn't it? That's your memory. You have to learn to recognize it as a memory. You have to remember, you learn to say, oh, I get it. This isn't. So whenever there is a reaction in your body and in your emotional apparatus that's completely out of proportion to what's happening in the present, you're living a memory. And you have to keep recognizing it, and recognizing it, and recognizing it. And it's by recognizing it, not by blaming yourself or making yourself wrong, but, oh, this is a memory. I get it. That's the way to do it.
On that note, you described how you felt and how you reacted to this thing with your wife.
Describe how you reacted to that.
Yeah.
I describe it as an abyss of loneliness and unlovableness. That's an abyss of loneliness and unlovableness. That's how I feel when this thing happens, regardless of my partner, my lovers, my friends. And I wanted to ask you, what's that thing that makes you click and get back up on your feet? Do you have a special toolkit that you could share with me? Because
okay, so yes, actually, I do have a toolkit, if you like. Sometimes I even use it myself, you know. So my toolkit is not the only one, by the way. There's many, many ways of working. I just happen to have my own. So, not to sound too commercial, but in my new book, there's a whole section on this. You know. In my old books, there isn't, because I didn't know yet. You know, but in my new book, there is. The last part is all about this, including exactly what you're talking about, okay? But there's a couple of things I want to tell you. You said, what do you do when you feel, is it unlovable? Or? Yeah. Okay, I have news for you. There's no such thing as feeling unlovable. That's not a feeling. Feelings are, I'm sad, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm angry. Those are feelings. I'm unlovable is what? It's a belief. Okay? The difference is that you don't argue with feelings. You can't. If you feel angry, you feel angry. If you're hungry, can I argue with you that you're not hungry? But if you believe you're unlovable, now we can ask, really, is that true? What's the evidence for it? Where did that belief come from? So we can work with beliefs. And it's not, the belief comes before the feeling. So it's a question of learning how to work with the belief. And that I'm unlovable, that was my belief. What else could I believe? I mean, she gave me to a stranger. Of course I'm unlovable. So when you're lovable, you know what you do? You go to medical school. Because nothing's going to want you all the time. Of course it doesn't work, does it? So, look, it's not that you think, it's not that you believe, you feel you're unlovable, you believe you're unlovable. And that belief came from somewhere, and you already know where it came from. There's lots of ways of working with it. Now there's this compassionate inquiry program that I developed, which therapists are studying all over the world, but there's also just a version for it for individual people. It's much cheaper and it's much easier to do. You can look it up. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just saying that that's what I got to offer. And I put much of that into the new book as well. But there's lots of therapies that will work with that. But it's not a feeling. Okay? It's a belief.